If truth is something outside of us, why do both Jesus and Buddha point inward, not upward, not outward, not toward a place we have never seen, inward? Why? This is not a debate, not a comparison, just a question, allowed to breathe. Take a moment. Do not answer yet. Most of us are used to searching. We search for meaning. We search for certainty. We search for something to hold on to. When life feels unstable, we look outward. We look to ideas, to beliefs, to people, to systems that promise clarity. We scroll. We read. We listen. We hope something out there will finally make sense of what we feel in here. And yet, in the middle of confusion, in moments of quiet despair, something strange often happens. We stop looking, not because we found an answer, but because the searching itself becomes heavy. In those moments, attention turns inward, not by choice, but naturally. There is a pause, a breath, a silence that feels unfamiliar yet oddly honest. No explanation appears, no voice from the sky, no final conclusion, just awareness. And this is where the question begins to matter. If truth were only external, why would silence feel so real? Why would stillness feel closer than any explanation we have collected? Across cultures, across centuries, across languages that never met, two figures emerged, separated by time, separated by geography, separated by tradition. Yet both made the same inward gesture, not as a metaphor, not as poetry alone, but as direction. Jesus spoke of a kingdom that is not found by observation. Buddha spoke of liberation that cannot be given by another. Different words, different contexts, the same movement. Inward. This does not mean they were saying the same thing. It does not mean all paths are identical. It simply raises a quiet question. Why does the inward direction appear again and again in the deepest human teachings? Before belief forms, before doctrine hardens, before institutions arise, the inward turn is already there, even before religion. Consider a moment from your own life, not a spiritual moment, not a dramatic one, a simple moment. Perhaps you were sitting alone at night. The noise of the day had faded, your phone was silent, no one was asking anything of you, and for a brief moment there was no role to play, no answer to defend, no image to maintain, just being. That moment may not have felt special, it may have felt ordinary, or even empty, yet it was honest. Nothing was added, nothing was performed, just awareness, noticing itself. This experience does not belong to any religion. It happens to believers and non-believers alike. Children experience it naturally, adults forget it gradually, and when life becomes too loud, we are pushed back into it again. Not by teaching, by exhaustion. This is why the inward question matters, not because it promises comfort, but because it points to something that already exists before belief. This channel is not here to tell you what to believe. It does not ask you to replace one idea with another. It simply creates space for questions that are usually drowned out, questions that do not demand answers, questions that slow us down instead of pushing us forward. Two paths, one mind, not as a conclusion, as an observation. Across different traditions, humans have used different maps. But maps are not the territory. Words are not the experience. At some point, every map must be put down. And when it is, what remains is not an idea. It is awareness. This video is not meant to convince you. It is not meant to correct you. It is not meant to lead you anywhere. It is meant to sit with you, to let a question unfold at its own pace. If truth were truly external, why would both paths invite us to look inward? Not to find something new, but to notice what has never left. You do not need to agree with this question. You do not need to answer it. You only need to notice what happens when it is asked slowly. Because sometimes the most honest insight does not arrive as an answer. It arrives as stillness. And from that stillness, another question naturally emerges. Not about belief, not about doctrine, but about experience. What happens when we stop looking outward and simply observe what is already here? Suffering does something very specific to human beings. It interrupts momentum, it breaks routines, it exposes what usually stays hidden. When things are going well, we move forward without questioning much. We plan, we build, we distract ourselves. But when suffering appears, the direction changes. At first, almost everyone looks outward. We look for answers. We look for explanations. We look for someone or something to tell us why this is happening. We search for help. We ask questions like, what went wrong? Who is responsible? How can this be fixed? We look for meaning. We want the pain to fit into a story that makes sense. This is human. When a child falls, they look around before they cry. They search for reassurance, for safety, for someone to respond. Adults do the same, just with more words. We search books, we search teachers, we search belief systems, we scroll, we read, we listen. We hope someone else has already figured this out. And often this outward search helps. Sometimes it brings comfort, sometimes it brings clarity, sometimes it gives structure to chaos. But suffering does not always stop when explanations arrive. There are moments when answers feel thin, when words feel distant, when even the most beautiful ideas cannot touch what hurts. In those moments, something changes, not deliberately, not as a practice. Something quieter happens. We fall silent, not because we decide to, but because there is nothing left to say. The mind slows down, questions lose their urgency, the noise fades, attention turns inward. Not inward as an idea, inward as a movement. Awareness begins to rest on what is actually being felt, the tightness in the chest, the weight in the body, the ache of uncertainty. There is no attempt to fix it, no attempt to name it correctly, just presence with what is. This moment does not feel religious, it does not feel philosophical, it feels raw, simple, undecorated. This is important, because this inward turn happens before belief, it happens before theology, before meditation techniques, before prayer formulas. It happens to humans, across cultures, across eras, across personal histories. A person grieving in silence does not need to be taught how to feel. A person overwhelmed by fear does not need instructions to notice their own breath. In deep moments of suffering, the body and mind naturally draw attention inward, not to escape, but because there is nowhere else to go. This is not enlightenment, it is not realization, it is honesty. And honesty does not require belief. Think of moments when words failed you, when explaining yourself felt impossible. Perhaps you sat quietly in a room, perhaps you stared out a window, perhaps you lay awake at night. Nothing was solved, nothing was resolved, yet something was present. You were still there, aware of the pain, aware of the silence, aware of being alive inside uncertainty. This awareness does not disappear when beliefs change. It does not depend on whether you call it spiritual. It is simply there. This is why suffering has always been a doorway, not because it is good, not because it is necessary, but because it strips away what is unnecessary. It removes distractions, it removes performance. What remains is experience itself, and experience is always known from the inside. Before any story is told, something is already aware. This is not a teaching, it is an observation. Religions emerged later to describe this territory, to give language to what people already noticed. But the noticing came first. A monk sitting in silence, a mother grieving a child, a man staring at the floor after losing everything. Different lives, same inward gravity. Suffering does not ask what you believe, it asks you to be present with what is happening now. And presence is not something you acquire, it is something that reveals itself when nothing else works. This is why the inward turn feels universal. It does not belong to Buddhism. It does not belong to Christianity. It belongs to humans having nowhere else to stand. This channel exists because many people sense this, but rarely hear it spoken plainly. Not loudly, not dramatically, just honestly. There is no attempt here to replace outward searching. There is no suggestion to abandon help or wisdom or tradition. The outward and the inward are not enemies. But it is worth noticing when the inward appears naturally, especially in moments we did not choose. Because what appears naturally is often more fundamental than what we adopt intentionally. And from this shared human experience, another question quietly arises, not about suffering, but about direction. If the inward turn happens before religion, why did certain teachings later point there deliberately? At some point after noticing how suffering turns people inward, a quieter curiosity begins to form. Not about pain anymore, but about direction. Across history, some voices did not only observe this inward movement, they pointed to it deliberately, not as theory, not as speculation, as orientation. One voice came from the Middle East, another from the Indian subcontinent, different centuries, different climates, different social worlds, yet the direction of their gesture was the same, inward. Jesus Christ spoke to people who were waiting for something dramatic. They expected a kingdom, a turning of history. A visible change that would arrive from above. They imagined signs in the sky, events in the future, a destination that would one day appear, but the words he offered were unexpectedly quiet. The kingdom of God is within you. Not someday, not elsewhere, within. This was not a geographical statement, not a prediction, not a promise of escape. It pointed to something present, something immediate, something already here. The kingdom was not described as a place to reach. It was described as a reality to recognize. This did not remove suffering. It did not erase injustice. It simply shifted attention, from waiting to noticing, from expectation to presence. The words did not instruct people to search harder. They invited people to look differently, inward, not toward imagination, not toward fantasy, but toward what is already alive before thought intervenes. Centuries earlier, another voice emerged in a very different context. Gautama Buddha did not speak of a kingdom. He spoke of liberation. But liberation was not described as something granted. It was not given by a god. It was not awarded by authority. It was seen, directly, through awareness of experience, through observation of the mind, through seeing how suffering arises and passes, not by believing the right idea, not by adopting the correct identity, by looking inward. This inward looking was not mystical. It was practical, grounded, immediate. Notice the breath, notice sensation, notice thought, not to control them, not to judge them, simply to see. In seeing, attachment loosens. In seeing, confusion softens. Liberation is not added, it is uncovered. These two teachings do not use the same language. They do not share the same symbols. They do not belong to the same worldview. Yet both redirect attention from what is expected later to what is present now, not to escape the world, but to meet it differently. This inward gesture is subtle. It does not announce itself loudly. It does not compete for attention. It does not offer quick certainty. It invites stillness. And stillness is uncomfortable for a searching mind, because the mind prefers movement, progress, achievement. Stillness offers no trophy, only clarity. In both teachings, the inward turn is not about isolation. It is not withdrawal from life. It is intimacy with experience. When Jesus spoke of love, it was not an abstract principle. It was a lived expression that arises from inner alignment. When Buddha spoke of compassion, it was not a commandment. It emerged naturally from clear seeing. Different frameworks, same direction. The inward gesture does not deny the outer world. It transforms how the outer world is met. Actions change because perception changes, not because rules are imposed, but because understanding deepens. This is why these teachings have endured. Not because they solved everything, but because they pointed to something timeless, a dimension of experience that does not age, a dimension that remains accessible, regardless of culture. People often argue about which path is right, which teaching is superior, which interpretation is correct, but arguments happen at the level of concepts. The inward gesture happens before concepts. It does not ask what you believe, it asks what you are noticing, right now, before interpretation, before labeling. Both teachings seem to say in their own way, do not mistake the map for the territory. Do not wait for transformation as an external event. Do not overlook what is already present. This is not an instruction to abandon community or tradition or faith. It is a reminder of where these things point, inward, not to find a separate self, but to see through the illusion of separation, not to become special, but to become honest. This honesty is not dramatic. It does not feel like revelation. It feels simple, almost too simple, which is why it is often missed. Different languages spoke it, different cultures carried it. The same direction remained, not because the teachers coordinated, but because human experience has a shared center. And once this is noticed, another layer of inquiry begins, not about teachings anymore, but about what remains when teachings fall away. After hearing different teachings, after comparing words and symbols, a quieter movement often begins, not outward, but inward, not toward another explanation, but away from explanations altogether. At some point, questions about belief soften, not because they are answered, but because they feel less urgent. Something else takes priority. Experience before doctrines, before rituals, before names. Imagine setting things aside, not rejecting them, not arguing with them, simply placing them down. Gently, the ideas you were given, the labels you carry, the roles you perform. For a moment, none of them are needed. You are not asked what you believe. You are not asked who you belong to. You are only here. When doctrines are set aside, there is no void. Something remains, awareness, not a concept of awareness, not a theory about it, The simple fact that experience is known, sounds are heard, sensations are felt, thoughts appear and fade, and something notices all of this, quietly. This noticing does not announce itself, it does not demand attention. It is already present before attention moves. This is what remains when explanations pause. A quiet presence, not dramatic, not mystical, ordinary. So ordinary that it is usually overlooked. This presence does not have a name. The moment you name it, it becomes an idea again. It does not belong to any identity. It is not Christian. It is not Buddhist. It is not spiritual or secular. It is simply the sense of being here, right now. Not as a thought, as a fact. Even confusion appears within it. Even doubt is known by it. Nothing needs to disappear for it to be present. This is important. Because when identity loosens, what remains is not emptiness. It is clarity. Not clarity as certainty, but clarity as openness. The openness that allows experience to unfold without resistance. This openness does not judge. It does not choose sides. It does not try to become something better. It does not seek progress. It is content to simply be. This is often misunderstood. People hear about letting go of identity and imagine loss. They imagine becoming passive, detached, indifferent. But what actually remains is intimacy. Intimacy with what is happening without filters. When names fall away, the world does not disappear. It becomes more immediate. Colors feel sharper, sounds feel closer, emotions feel more honest. There is no distance created by self-definition. There is just experience meeting awareness. This state does not require practice to exist. Practices may point to it, teachings may circle around it, but it is already here before all of that. This is why so many traditions, despite their differences, eventually arrive at silence. Not silence as absence of sound, silence as absence of interpretation. In silence, there is no argument, no hierarchy, no comparison, only presence. Perhaps this is what both Jesus and Buddha were pointing to. Not a belief system, not an institution, but a direct encounter with what remains when the mind stops dividing experience into categories. Before religion became something to follow, it may have been something to notice, a way of seeing, a way of being. Before rules, before authority, there was awareness meeting life as it is. Over time, structures formed, rituals developed, languages hardened. These things were not wrong, they served human needs, but they were never the essence. The essence cannot be organized, it cannot be owned, it does not belong to history, it belongs to now. This does not mean that teachings are useless, it means they are secondary. Pointers, not destinations. Signs along the road, not the ground beneath your feet. When you stand on the ground itself, signs are no longer needed. This standing is not an achievement, it is a relaxation. A release from trying to become someone, from trying to arrive somewhere. In this release, life continues. You still speak, you still act, you still care, but the actions are less heavy. They do not need to confirm an identity, they simply respond to what is needed. This is what makes this inquiry timeless. It does not depend on belief, it does not require agreement, it only asks for honesty. What is here before you tell a story about it? What is present before you say who you are? This presence does not answer questions, it dissolves the need to ask some of them. And in this dissolving, another quiet movement appears, not inward this time, but outward, a return, not to belief but to life, seen freshly, met gently. And from here the final question naturally arises, not about truth, not about teachings, but about how this awareness meets the world. There is nothing left to explain, not because everything is clear, but because explanation is no longer the point. Words have done what they can do. They have pointed, they have slowed the pace, they have made space. Now they step back. What remains does not need instruction. It does not need to be named. It does not need to be defended. It is already present before any sentence begins. You are not being asked to believe anything. You are not being asked to agree. You are not being asked to remember a teaching or adopt a view. Nothing is required. This moment does not depend on understanding. Understanding happens in thought. This moment happens before thought. You may notice sounds, perhaps the sound of a voice, perhaps the sound of a room. You may notice sensations, the weight of the body, the movement of breath. You may notice thoughts commenting quietly in the background. None of this needs to change. Nothing needs to stop. Nothing needs to improve. All of it is already appearing, and something is aware of it. This awareness is not personal, it is not owned. It does not belong to a name or a story. It does not arrive when you focus harder. It does not leave when you are distracted. It is constant through every change. It is present in clarity and in confusion, in interest and in boredom, in silence and in noise. This is not a special state. It is the most ordinary thing there is, so ordinary that it is usually ignored. We tend to look past it toward what it contains. Thoughts, feelings, memories. We analyze those, we evaluate them, we try to manage them, but the awareness in which they appear remains unnoticed. Not because it is hidden, because it is too close. It is closer than attention, closer than effort. It is the background that never becomes an object. Nothing you do can bring it closer. Nothing you stop doing can make it go away. It is already here. You may notice a subtle resistance, a feeling of wanting something more, a desire for a final statement. That desire is also known. You may notice a sense of relief, a sense of nothing needing to happen. That is also known. Everything that appears within this same field. There is no need to hold on to it. There is no way to lose it. Trying to grasp it turns it into an idea. Letting it be reveals what was always there. This is not an ending. It is not a beginning. It is simply what remains when the search pauses. If thoughts arise, let them arise. If silence appears, let it be silent. No preference is needed. No conclusion is needed. There is nothing to carry forward from this moment. There is nothing to apply later. Life will continue. Thought will return. Roles will resume, and this awareness will still be here, unchanged, not watching from a distance, not intervening, simply present. So there is only one question left, not to answer, just to notice. Right now, what is aware of these words? Pause, silence, end.